Thank you so much, my leader. I guess I am Lincoln or Lincoln, depending which school you went to. I am a husband to Zva. I am a father to Lishe, Amara, and Liam. And I'm a colleague to thousands of colleagues I work with at Net1 and friends to hundreds of people that have journeyed with me through the years, and a passionate person about the concept of leadership because leadership matters. And I see myself as a keen student of leadership. And I'm always learning about it, always trying to improve myself and help others in the process. And yeah, that's who I am, just an ordinary bloke. Yeah.
If you're a student, I don't know what that makes us, but we will find out as the night goes. So, just kickstarting in the concept of leadership. COVID came in 2020. I guess it changed a lot of things. What has COVID really asked from leadership?
I think the first thing one has to look at is let's use COVID terminology. In COVID terminology, we talk about comorbidities, right? That word about illnesses that you may have that may affect you more when you've got COVID. What COVID has done is to expose our comorbidities as leaders. What are those internal shortcomings we have as leaders? Because what COVID has done is to reveal who we really are beyond the corporate masks or entrepreneurial mask or power mask. Who are we when the chips are down? Can we lead in times of crisis? And so it was a big reveal, and many leaders failed the test because they cloaked themselves with an aura of invincibility, believed more in their power and status. When all of that is taken away and all you have is a screen to talk to your team, you don't have the corner office, you don't have the power and prestige of walking out and shouting. And therefore, what you actually needed was authenticity. What COVID required of us is to be our true selves. How do you lead without knowing who you are? Your true, honest self. Who are you? The second thing that it asked of us is compassion, because we may all be facing the same storm, yet we're in different boats. And as a leader, you have to navigate your boat ashore because we need you to be there. But at the same time, you have to worry about all the other boats of the people that you lead. And so that meant that we needed to have compassion. The third ask was sensitivity. Sensitivity to everybody's mental health. Understanding what people are going through, which are all very different because everybody has gone through this in different ways, suffered pains different ways. And I guess the last thing that is asked of us as leaders is to look after our own personal lives. What do I mean by that? Are there comorbidities in our own health? Are there comorbidities in our own relationships, in our relationships with our children? Because now we couldn't just kiss your loved one goodbye and go to work. You are here the whole time. The 2 or 3 of you are here. Your children, you are here. So people can actually see who you are. So if you are the boss who's always swearing at people, shouting at everybody, you are doing that now at home, and everybody is having a front row seat watching what you do. So these are some of the asks that have been there of COVID.
Sure. And I wonder how many of us can be sensitive and truly and compassionate, but we are going to unpack it further. So most of the time when people go up the corporate ladder or start climbing the corporate ladder, they start being important and inaccessible. But what that does as well is people then lose touch with either their employees that they are leading, their customers, and also the processes. So I want to ask you, Mr. Melly, are you closer to your people And if you are, how do you make sure that you don't lose the people and you are just alone up there?
It's so difficult to answer that question because it's only the people I work with who can honestly answer that question. All I can say is what I try and do, to never lose touch with my team, to always have the pulse of my team, and to always be in touch with what's happening in the coalface. So the first thing is I'm a firm believer that the front line is the bottom line. So throughout my career, I've spent 80% of my time with staff and customers in the front line. And that's been a deliberate choice because in head office, there are no customers. And therefore, I need to be in head office to be aligning with other colleagues, do the governance and all those things, meet the teams that are in head office. But the rest of the time, I'm spending time in the field, listening, engaging, talking to people, sensing, walking in their shoes, and so on. And the insights I get from that are just amazing. I have a colleague, her name is Patience Stella Musa. So she teases me that when I've come back from the field, there's like a pile of work that needs to be done because I come with all of this feedback because I've been listening to the people in the front line. So that's the first deliberate thing I've done in my life, to never lose touch with what's happening. The second one is that I've never been married to titles and status. It means absolutely nothing to me. That's why when I introduce myself on the names I was given by my parents, not the titles I've been given by corporates. A lot of people get married to their titles. If I'm fired by the organization where I work, I will remain Lincoln because I'm not defined by the titles that are there. So there are many people who suddenly treat me differently because I have a fancy title. And I look at them with amusement because they're not talking to me, they're talking to the title. So being grounded in knowing who you are is important so that you don't lose touch with what's going on. The third one is feedback. You must be open for feedback as a leader. There is a reason why God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth. So as a leader, you cannot be like a hippo. It's got the biggest mouth and the smallest ears. So as a leader, you actually have to listen more and sense more so that when you do interact with people on the ground, it's not just you talking. You are listening, you are sensing, you're trying to understand. Even the way people ask questions, they've got a particular frame of reference. Unless you can get in that frame of reference and say, actually, there's a disconnect between the way I see the world and so on. And the last piece is empowerment. I believe in empowering the leaders that I work with. Surround myself with very skilled and capable people who run their business. And therefore, when I go and visit their business, I don't come there as some important person with a convoy and all of that. I am their guest. They tell me what to do. And mine is to do the things that they want me to do to make their business to succeed. In that way, on any given day, I can be getting different feedbacks on a range of things from leaders, from staff members, from customers. In that way, you don't lose touch with what's happening on the ground. And my advice to many young leaders, don't lead through reports. I've never seen anybody who goes out of their way to write a bad report. Even when things are bad, somebody will find a way of putting that report within a particular context. But engaging with people on the ground, you get a lot of insights and a lot of learning. And it challenges your own paradigm. You might go to an environment with preconceived ideas, but you might find that your views have to change because the people on the ground or the customers or the stakeholders have a different view of the world.
In a world where we are so full of information and data, I guess when you say don't lead through reports, now you're confusing us, the learners, because we're thinking, hey, I must pull this data to prove that this is actually what is happening on the ground. But I want to actually lean back on what you said around empowerment. And where I want to take it now is companies now are talking transformation, and they're talking transformation on a very different levels: gender, race, even generations, because you find millennials can't deal with a previous generation whatsoever. So what is your feel around this transformation? Is it just a lip service? What your general observation now? And is it something that we could genuinely achieve if we were to work through it?
If we're genuine, we can. But I fear that corporate South Africa is still paying a lot of lip service to transformation in its true essence. Because a lot of people do not actually believe that Black people, young people, women, those who are disabled can make the same contribution and better. So what you find is that our business schools and the books we read have a particular caricature of a leader, which is a hero leader, mostly white Anglo-Saxon male. And that's the portrayal of a leader who knows it all, does it all. In the real world, organizations are led by multidisciplinary teams of people that work together, that come from a diverse range of backgrounds in terms of age, in terms of gender, in terms of outlook. So throughout my career, I've always backed the trend. I've always believed in young people because there were people who gave me opportunities to lead at a very young age. And therefore, I've never hesitated to make appointments of young people, and they've never disappointed me. Secondly, a lot of people pay lip service to the gender question. And for me, if you're a leader and you're not a gender activist, I think you'll come short because you're excluding more than half the population in your leadership ranks. So as far back as 2001, which was one of my most significant appointments of a CEO for our bank in Zimbabwe, who was a woman, which raised eyebrows, but Pindi was great. She was great for the job, stayed at the Standard Bank for many years, retired, this year, now running 7 countries. So the outlook has to be right. The third one is if you don't create harmony within the team so that you have an environment where women have a space to thrive, they have a voice, and it's not just ticking numbers, then you have a chance. If young people have a voice, and also you have a good combination of experienced people and young people. Also, you can't at any moment talk about diversity, a sense of inclusion, and a sense of belonging if you're not dealing with some of the more difficult things that people don't want to tackle. So let me come with a few. One, gender-based pay, right? If there's no gender parity, you have a problem. So you ask most leaders, tell me about the gender gap, and they don't know. How are you going to fix it if you don't know it? So you actually have to monitor what is the gender gap between males and females in your environment. What's the race gap between the people in your team? And then start working towards closing that gap. 2, if you are working with women, there is no manual you will get from HR about how to lead a woman going through a divorce. You will get no manual from HR how to lead a woman who's in an abusive relationship. You will get no manual from HR how to lead a woman who's just had a miscarriage. There is no manual from HR about how to lead a woman who wants to have children but cannot have children. If you cannot lead a woman who is going through post-natal depression, these are the real things that are facing women on a daily basis, trying to balance their family life and their work life. All of these are real things. So what I try and encourage leaders is to get to know the full person so that you can journey with them and not say, no, I am going to lead them at a distance, because it's not going to work. You have to understand and make sure that you're supporting people through all of that. So for me, transformation goes beyond just lip service, is to identify those people in society who the dominant group has excluded and include them to make the circle bigger. And every time I've made those choices, I've never been disappointed. And so it's got to be deliberate. You have to go against the grain. And when you make those appointments, you'll get a lot of criticism. But that comes with the territory. Leadership is not a popularity contest. You have to do the things that make sense for you, that are part of your value system. So I was brought up by very strong women who made me not to see myself as being different. I've learned from many of my colleagues who are women, and I learn even today with the women I work with who challenge me, call me to account. In that way, you develop and you become better. But you must be willing to learn from young people, to learn from women, and so on. And I guess that's the way I believe in a much more diverse environment. It's not a tick box exercise.
Sure. I see Tonzoka is also saying unfiltered truth, no manual indeed. And the sad thing about those, when you're talking about it, is even as women, we don't know how to deal with women going through what you have just talked about. And we have women that are leading women. It's also about how we as women treat other women where, they're going through things that maybe they don't even talk about, but they're going through those things. You mentioned issues around women. You also know so much, but where is that coming from? Is it just a passion thing? Is it because you, like you said, you were raised by strong women, or where is that just coming from?
I think it's a combination. And I like to use the example of white Democrats who had all the advantages under apartheid, but felt that this system is not sustainable. And therefore, they would join Black people in a democratic struggle for a non-racial society. Equally, when we joined the struggle, we fought against all forms of oppression. It can't be that if now I have freedom, I forget that women still remain oppressed. So that's my first founding pillar, was my involvement at the early age in the national democratic struggle as it was. There was no tender, there was no money. It was really believing then that the emancipation of women is the emancipation of a nation. Two, I had a role model in my father, who I think was a gender activist in those times, in the way he related to my mom, in the way he brought us up. Thirdly, I had the women who raised me, my mom, my grannies, and the values they imparted were very, very strong. Then I grew up with many strong female friends who also had very strong views. And then I met my wife now, my partner then, who from day one we became equals. So I kind of understood from day one that whatever titles I had from outside meant nothing in the relationship. And that hasn't changed. And the kids, I think, enjoy this more than most. And then the last group is all the women colleagues I've worked with throughout my life have taught me so much. The keenness to learn from all these experiences make me again a student who's always learning. There was one time I wrote an article on my blog, and I'd been invited to go and speak at a women's event. And I thought, no, man, why don't I ask the women I've worked with about their experience and where I got things right and where I got things wrong. And the feedback was so rich that I thought this has to be shared. And I was able to publicize that, put it in my blog, even when it had things that were critical about me, because that's the only way I could learn, was they were giving me feedback. To give an example, I normally like joking and teasing people and whatever. But one of the colleagues there was saying, you don't understand how difficult it is to be pregnant and how your self-esteem sometimes is affected. And I made a joke, and that joke hurt her badly because it found her in the most vulnerable of times. But if I didn't read that, I wouldn't have known. So it's continuously learning and be willing to change when you understand things. And then also what has helped me is that I've got two daughters who are very opinionated. And so they also have their views, and that helps as well. And I also want to raise a son to see the world very differently.
Thank you so much for that answer. Talking about your blog, You've written a lot of things about leadership, and I invite everybody to go Google and check, and we will also give them the link to get the things that you wrote. There's things that you wrote, and some of the things that stood out for me when I was looking for things to post on my socials building up to this was the not so glamorous things that you wrote about leadership. I think most of the time we look at leadership and it's the title, the power, and all those nice things that people want. But you have taken some time to pen down the not so nice things about leadership. And I want us to talk a little bit about those things that are not so nice about leadership.
There's a lot of things that I always ask people, why do you want to lead? Because if it is the perks and the power and the status and the money, understand that you will make power, perks, money, status type decisions. But if you're driven by something higher, then when the difficult moments come, you've got clarity of thought as to why you need to do the difficult things. And let's talk about those difficult things. One, to ask somebody to leave an organization is not an easy thing, but it's part of leadership. It's part of leadership. Sometimes you have to ask somebody to leave for the greater interest of an organization because they are abusing everybody else and they are not living by the values of the organization, or they are not performing. As long as it's done with dignity and respect, you cannot flinch your responsibility to do that. But you cannot take away that person's dignity and humanity whilst they're doing it. Two, you may be called upon to close a business, to close it down with people in that business, with employees in that business, or to retrench people in a business. Those are part of the leadership things that are there. That's why, as a leader, you can't be a populist. You have to know what needs to be done and be able to do it and take people along with you as you do those things. You may be sometimes exposed wrongdoing among your fellow colleagues. But the point is, do you stand up for what's right? You know, fidelity to principle or fidelity to an individual. If you've got fidelity to principle, you won't blink. You will do the right thing, right? So these are all the difficult things, and there are many others that come with leadership. As long as you can introspect and say, I know why I've done this. My value system is intact. My prejudices have not affected the decisions that I'm taking. Then you can do that. It comes with a lot of criticism. Sometimes the criticism is personal, sometimes very deep. One of the lowest moments in my life came in 2010, where I had to retrench somebody who was very dear to me, who was one of the brightest people I've ever worked with. But she was 8 months pregnant with a very complicated pregnancy. But in the construct of the way the retrenchment was being done, it was not being done on the basis of individuals. It was being done on the basis of roles. And her role was in the middle of that. And so I had to call the husband to say, can I go and consult at home so that she doesn't have to come to work? And he said, you know her as well as I do. There is no way she's going to listen to any of us. She will go to work because she wants to be there with the team. So you can imagine post the retrenchment, all I could think of is, God, please make sure that the child lives, that their son is able to live. That lives with you for the rest of your life. We've subsequently conversed and our relationship is fine. But again, it gives you an example of how bad things can become. And that's the reality, that in leadership, sometimes you're going to have to take difficult decisions. We see many organizations fail, or institutions, or state-owned enterprises, or municipalities, or whatever, because leaders are not willing or sometimes not able to make the decisions that they need to make. But the knock-on consequence is bigger than what that person is fearing to do. So these are the realities that face leaders. Sometimes there are 3 amazing candidates, and there's a marginal difference between the 3. And you have to say, I've chosen this one, and these are my reasons. It doesn't mean the other two are bad. I've come through so many people who said, Lincoln, what can I do better? What could I do? What did I do wrong? And I would say sometimes there was just somebody that in our eyes was slightly better than me on what we're looking for. There are times where I would go to somebody who expects a role and they're senior, they're very experienced. But for what I need for the future, I might go and get a younger person because they might have a different lens. I must go to that person and explain to them. Or there might be a younger person who's moving very fast. But for where we need to go, I might need that experience. So all of these things require that you go and open yourself up to others, your thinking, your logic, and don't seek for acceptance, seek for understanding. If at least people understand your logic, they may not agree with it. And those are some of the difficulties, but they are part of, the journeys of leadership.
Oh, wow. Thank you for unpacking it like that for us. And just at the back of that, and I think we can now talk to people that maybe are not even in leadership roles now. Can one aspire to be a leader, or can one choose not to be a leader in one way or another? And if somebody aspire to be a leader, where do they really start? Because I think there's also still some nice things about leadership.
I think the most important thing for me is the Oracle of Delphi has got these wonderful words written from many years back. And they say, know thyself. This is the most important thing as a leader. You have to know thyself. Because if you know thyself, the reasons why you want to lead and how do you see leadership will then become clear. As I say, most people see it in the context of a better pay, status, power, perks, and all of those things. But in reality, and this is why I call so many people my leader, it's because leadership is a choice. It's a decision made. It's a path followed. It's a direction taken, right? Rosa Parks was not a leader, but she refused to get up from the bus. Through that, it started a movement. Some of the people who are at the forefront of the Me Too movement said no to unwanted sexual advances and began a movement that toppled many leaders of many companies. Some of the whistleblowers we have given us the Zondo Commission because they said, not on my watch. So my sense is that we have a lot of people that are in leadership roles, but they do not lead. They are not leaders. They just occupy leadership roles. Then you have a lot of people who are actually leading, but have not been given the title to lead. I tend to see those people. Why? Because if I think of many of the people on your platform, if they just think back to their lives, there was a teacher or a coach or a principal or an uncle or an aunt who just believed in them and supported them through the most difficult times without asking for anything in return. At that moment, that person was leading. When we now come back and we now got our fancy titles, we go back, some of those people are exactly in the same position they were 15, 20 years back. They didn't do that to get something back. They did it because it mattered to them. They are passionate about growing people. So when I look at leaders, those are the people I admire. I am here today because of those people. So whenever I think of leadership, I think of my teachers. I think of my priests. I think of my parents. I think of my uncles. All these people who molded me into what I am because they did something without compensation, without a title, without any recognition. Now, that's where it starts for me. If you are one of those people, start leading where you are. You know that song, right in the corner where you are. In your area of influence, make a difference, however small. Because when it's dark, you light a candle. You don't look around whether somebody else has lit a candle. Somebody else finds darkness, lights a candle. Within a short space of time, there's light because we dared to light a candle. And I think that for me is where leadership starts. If then you then get chosen or elected or voted in or whatever to be a leader with a title, you use the same value system to now take this area of responsibility and make sure that those things that our teachers, our parents, and our uncles were doing, you magnify them many times. But if you're starting by just wanting the title, I think you're missing a big trick. So for me, that's been my journey. The people I have admired are those people that molded me. Mr. Kovu was my coach. Mrs. Mopa, who's still my mentor today, was my school principal. You know, my dad, my mom, the Reverend Haya, the Reverend Kundu, the Reverend Soga. These people, you know, in the darkness of the 80s, all I wanted was to fight. These people could tell me that there is a brighter future ahead. That's leadership. Unfortunately, it's not glamorous, but you know what? It is impactful and it comes from deep within. Those people don't look for to be exalted. They don't look for affirmation. They don't look for status. A lot of what they do is hidden from the naked eye. So I always say our leaders are hidden in plain sight. It's just that we use the wrong lens to see leaders. I see so many people on television every day calling themselves leaders, barking, shouting, doing all of these things. But you know what? They're leading nobody. That is just taking a stroll, an ego trip. But many of the people in our villages, in our townships, who are making a difference, sometimes with very little means, those are the people that excite me.
Talking about mentorship, you mentioned a lot of your mentors and the people that are really leading and not even for the bling. What is your take on mentorship? And I want us to talk about it from the receiving end. And you already told us that you receive mentorship, but also the giving end. Like maybe we can talk about it as a concept, but also, you know, how to receive and how to give it. And maybe to even dedicate time. I mean, I'm just thinking about your role and what you're doing and the many things you're involved in. So one would have to be deliberate if you want to be involved in those things.
I have very controversial views about mentorship because there is such a huge need out there. I will say for support, and I'll broadly use the word support as an all-encompassing word. Because if you think of mentorship in its structured manner, someone like me at best can mentor effectively maybe 6 or 7 people. But there is a demand out there, right? So I've chosen a deliberate different path where I don't use more the title mentorship. I say I'm there to support and be part of somebody's journey, which means that I have so many people who can pull at any given moment and say, I've got this problem, can you help? Because some people just need an ear to listen. Some people at some point just need a shoulder to cry on. Some people just need advice. So what I find is that the more people I speak to, it's a myriad of things. But if you try to pigeonhole it to coaching or mentorship or support or whatever, you get caught in all of that. And there are disciplines of mentorship, there are disciplines of coaching. I'm not discarding that. I'm just talking about what I've had to do given the need I see out there. And so that's what I've tried to do, is to provide support to a range of people. And all I ask of those people is when the need is there, pull, I'll be there. 2, I've also asked them, if it has worked for you, go and do to others what I've done for you. That's all, right? There is a particular one I do want to address, which is the issue of another term people call sponsorship. I have really big problems with this concept. I know people who espouse it mean well, but what they don't look at is the unintended consequence. Because even some people who come to me for mentorship or support or whatever, some of them come because they think that if they are mentored by me or supported by me, their path will be easier. And I have to say to them, it can't be. Because if it is, then it's corruption. Because why are the other 99 people out of the 100 in a worse off position if there's a job? Because you are sponsored by me, you must get an advantage. So my support should be supporting the person so that if they're so able to go in front of a panel or whatever, on their own, they must be able to win, just like others can go and get the support from somebody else. But if they are chosen few, supported by a few, then we have a very corrupt system. And people find this very disappointing when I say this. Others have left because they came to the mentorship because they thought that they would have an advantage. I'm saying, but why? Why is it if your CV comes in my environment, I can't say yes to you and so no to somebody else because I mentor you? I have to actually recuse myself. So you are worse off by being mentored by me because I'm just going to recuse myself every time something has to do with you. The last piece, which is probably even more controversial, is that this is also used as an argument that it is important for women to have sponsors in order for them to succeed. I say, I agree, only if Lincoln sponsors and other male sponsors are as visible. Because why is it that nobody knows Lincoln's sponsor, but everyone wants to know Lizzie's sponsor? Why is the sponsor in the front and the candidate at the back? But when it's me, nobody asks me who I talk to, who are the people who give me advice. All they say is, there's Lincoln. But I rely on so many people. But when it's women, they want the sponsor to be in the front. Then I'm saying, then that sponsor is no longer a sponsor, they're a blesser. Because why are they in front? It should be irrelevant who is supporting Lizzie in her success. All those people should be in the background. If you want to talk about them, you can talk about them. But nobody talks about those people when it comes to males. But when it's women, people say, you must have a sponsor. Everyone who's a sponsor, coach, mentor, whatever, please, at the back, let the candidate shine. And if the candidate can then say, when they take their prize, I'd like to thank my sponsor, please be it. But not the sponsor in the front and the candidate in the back. I have a problem with that. And I know it's very controversial, but you didn't ask us to talk about easy things. You asked us to talk about difficult things.
I actually think I got to the point where whatever the answers I needed, I got them. Now I'm going to allow people to ask you questions. People started at 8:10 already throwing in questions in the chat. And I'm going to start with Morgan Swan Tembeni. Baba, you have traveled and your family has supported you in all the work assignment, travels, Nigeria, China. How easy was it to sell it to the house? I guess it's the move to China, Nigeria, and all those assignments.
I think I got it wrong. And I write a lot about this so that younger people don't get it wrong. At the end of 2012, I was at the height of my corporate success. Everything was going great, and the organization sent me to Harvard. And I went to Harvard because I thought, wow, this is my father's dream. When I was trying to fight, my father told me to go to Harvard. But the most profound thing happened at Harvard is that I got a lecture from a professor called Professor Clay Christensen. And his theme for his lecture was, how will you measure your life? And he told the story of his class, that when they had a 40th reunion or 30th reunion, about 10% or whatever of the guys were in jail. A bigger group was divorced. Another group had no relationship with their children, but they were all very successful. And he said he had taken a decision early in his life to invest in his family, to invest in his relationship with his family. And he said, nobody works out to be divorced. Nobody wakes up to have no relation with their children. But it's the choices you make. And that hit me hard because I realized that as much as I said I loved my wife and I loved my family, I was always putting the organization first. When my wife would say to me, "You're not present," I was like, "I'm here. What are you talking about?" And so I had to have a deep introspection, and I knew I had to change. And so if that lecture had come years earlier, it would have been even a greater blessing. But since 2013, I had to be clear in my mind that my family is a huge part of my diary. They were not asking me to work less harder. They were not asking me to travel less, but they were asking me to be conscious of the choices I make. So I see a lot of people who go on the false thing I had, which was I was getting the promotions, the money was good, everybody was saying I was well, and I was thinking I was doing it for the family. But I didn't ask them whether that's what they wanted. So the last 7 years has been good for me because I have been more engaged and more involved in my family life. Still work harder, still travel, still do all of those things, but much more conscious. So what really matters is what we don't invest in, is the relationships that really matter. And what you don't want is to be old, rich, but you have no family. And so that early part of my career, I wish I had done it better, but it was never too late. I'm now 53 years old. I'm at peace with the world, and I'm at peace with where my life is at for the decisions that I took in 2013 because of Professor Clay Christensen.
Thank you so much. Katlego Thaba is saying, Tate Lincoln, I agree with you with the issue you take against sponsorship. I'd like to ask in terms of practicality, what should people do in a climate dominated by sponsorship? So for example, if I don't have a sponsor in line with what you said, but others around have sponsors, wouldn't this leave me at a disadvantage? And some sponsorships are silent, while some sponsors ensure that their sponsored people are represented in senior discussions, but never announce themselves as sponsors.
So it's a very deeply personal choice. I chose in my life not to have sponsors or allies or people I rely on and so on, because I chose my independence and I treasure my independence very, very much. And that is why throughout my career, I've been outspoken about anything that I don't agree with. I do things the way I see them. Now, if I had a sponsor or if I had people that were championing me, maybe they could say, you are messing up our plan. So I decided long ago to be fiercely independent. Even when I was involved in politics, I was fiercely independent. I never wanted to rely on a group of people or some people. So that if I were to leave that institution, I want to be successful regardless of what institution I find myself in. I also never wanted to be successful depending on who is the ruling party in that company, because that ruling party changes, and then where am I? Or I align myself with this particular cabal or this particular clique. That clique is removed, and then I'm left. So there is nothing wrong with being politically savvy. There's nothing wrong with building relationships. What I have a problem with is affiliating and become part of a faction or part of a group of people that are owned by a particular person. That I do not like. The people I like and admire, that I work with, they know they have my support because of the work that they do. But if I'm knocked by a bus tomorrow, I expect them to continue to do well, even under a different manager or a different leader. But if their only calling card is that Lincoln is there, then they'll fail, because they can only succeed in a Lincoln-dominated environment. So my caution is, it's a personal choice, but if you choose that route, know that you are part of the problem. So all my career, I've spent so much time away from head office that I didn't care what the bosses were saying about me. I just did my work, and the opportunities just kept on coming.
I actually have a partner in crime, Harold, who will just summarize the comments that we had. I think I addressed all the questions there is. So if I can just allow Harold to take some time, just in summary what people have been saying throughout the conversation, and then we will let you proceed.
I thank you. Good evening, Tate Mali, and good evening, Melisi. And
Good evening, my leader.
Yeah, evening, my leader. What a profound session. Thanks, and thanks. So many people here have expressed their sincere gratitude, and they're also saying to the chair, woman, so many insights here. So there is something that you emphasize here, that you need to know the full person. And it's when you mentioned a few examples of situations where a woman may go through a postnatal depression, for example, struggling to conceive, going through a divorce. There is no manual from any HR that you'll get on how to navigate that. You also emphasize the importance of being a gender activist as a leader. You asked a very pertinent question here, saying, do you know the gender pay gap in your team? And I was asking myself, actually, do I know? And then be deliberate to go against the grain. So my leader, this goes hand in hand with the topic that becomes the most important topic for the day, the definition of a sponsor. Because you mentioned the issue of going against the grain earlier. And then when you took us to the definition of a sponsor, I could see the interest that every one of us had on that topic. And we have really elaborated on it very well. You did say we must not be populist as a leader, because if you're a populist, you'll struggle to make those difficult decisions. I will, from today, I think even other people, go and read on Oracle of Delphi, know thyself. As you mentioned Rosa Parks without going into detail, but it's quite clear that she did something very significant as a leader of those yesteryears. And you spoke about the fact that being a leader doesn't have to be the role, but the actions that you take. Hence, you mentioned the Me Too movement, you mentioned the State Capture Commission whistleblowers. So there was just so many insights, my leader. Even more profound was the issue of leaders are hidden in plain sight. How do we even begin to see the opportunities there when leaders are just in plain sight, and we keep on looking for those with titles? And the mention of your parents in the speech, they must be proud wherever they are. The mention of the church leaders, I think in recent times, you have seen church leaders take a bit of a beating from a reputation point of view, but they still have space in the leadership space. And you have mentioned not just one, I think at least two church leaders that shaped your leadership. So from our side, it's a sincere gratitude for you to have taken your time and give us these nuggets. We as the young people, we call them bars. But I think this was beyond bars, because you were having a conversation that is honest. One of the colleagues here said, this is an honest conversation where you are reflecting. You are being vulnerable, because it's not easy to go against the grain when I have heard so many things about sponsorship. And then you say, let's have a conversation. I may be wrong, I may be right, but I'm going to share my views. And they were well thought, and we're really appreciative. So I thank you. Hopefully, Chair, it proves that I listened a little bit.
Yeah, yo, Harold. Yeah, you are levels, my leader. You captured so many things. The one parting shot I want to say, I guess, to everybody on the line is that my plea is, please bring yourself to work. We find that so many people go into a corporate environment and put on a corporate attire or a corporate mask. And that means we can only get 5 or 10% of who they are. But if you bring your full self to an environment, you are who you are. And I have tried to be who I am when I'm with my friends, when I'm with my family, when I'm with my colleagues. I'm just the same person. And therefore, I don't have to rehearse, oh my God, I'm in this audience now. How do I position myself? Okay, what mask or what hat must I wear? I think that we're losing so many people who are just not getting to their full potential because they think in order to succeed, I must mimic that leader. I must speak like that leader. I must be like that thing. So when I look back now, I mean, I'm at the twilight years of my career. Those choices I made then were very deliberate because there were things I was taught how I was brought up. I wasn't going to let those go for a corporate setting. I don't lose who I am in a corporate setting. And I want so many people to carry themselves the way they are. And I think a lot of people shrink when they walk into a corporate and then come alive outside the corporate. And I think it's bad also for organizations because they are not seeing the gems. If you are a bank, you say that guy is teller number one, but that guy is the leader of the youth in that entire township. But you don't know that because you just know them as teller number one. That other one is the leader of Women's Manyano. You wouldn't know because they can't bring themselves to work. So the first job as leaders to create the environment for stars to shine. And for me, if you're not attracting stars, you're not attracting and be a magnet for talent as a leader, I think you're making a big mistake. Go hire people that are much better than you and give them the space to be their best and get out of their way. Do your job so that they can do theirs and don't do their job. So thank you so much, Harold, for the way you've really summed up the conversation.
Thank you so much, my leader, for the night. And I think even our audience, I was so scared that what am I going to tell those people? I mean, we have the executive team here. We have Nanda boss that doing some great work. We have so many, I'm not going to mention everybody by name. We have doctors here. We have CAs. We have people that I wouldn't even tell anything. But I think people really got so much from you. Just for your information, there's a second session loading. From the people there. People are asking, and we are here for the people. So clearly we will schedule another one with you, Mr. Mali, because I guess it was enough for tonight, but we are going to need more. But I'm just going to release everyone now. Good night, everyone, and thank you